Okay, better week this week. Primarily because Lupinranger vs. Patranger featured very little Keichiro. Yeah, it seems like I'm beating a dead horse with my dislike of the guy, but this week proves that if you exclude him from the show, you end up making a better show, as it's mainly focused on Tsukasa and Sakuya and how they deal with their injuries to still do their frickin' jobs, as Togeno Aves, that's the guy from last week, the spiky guy whose name I didn't mention, and I didn't have my phone with me last week to, actually look up the thing. But yeah, he's on the outs and outs with the Gangler, as, Dogranio is, pissed off he wastes his time. Instead, Destra, the giant watermelon guy, decides to give him a chance to, make himself useful to the general, and it's, considering how, Destra has been doing stuff thus far, it feels like it's to his own gains. Like, this is one of his plans that, see, now I'm forgetting the Monster of the Week's name. Togeno is being, partying. Of course, he gets a new Lupin collection piece, and this one is based off of the Mega Sling from Mega Ranger. It was Mega Yellow's weapon. And I pretty much recognize that right off the bat as another, not quite modded toy or modded prop, but definitely using similar molding. But yeah, basically his plan is a repeat of the plan he used against Keichiro, and trapping the inside of his chest with the slingshot in it, so when a Lupinranger comes to grab it, he's shot with the same needles that got Keichiro, and Kairi in the late end of the episode ends up being affected by this. In the interim, though, it's pretty much showing once again how the Lupinranger are overall better characters than the Patranger, simply because they show how much they care as, part of their own free will, and not just because it's their job, as after learning of the condition of the officers from Hilltop, they go to, see them in that condition and end up deciding to fight the monster for them, simply so they won't have to, suffer through battle even with their injuries. It's like, it's doing the caring thing. Granted, the Patranger then fight through their injuries, which is dramatic and meaningful for Tsukasa and Sakuya, because, they're making up for Keichiro being an idiot, and when you think about it, their injuries are the result of Keichiro's own actions as well, because he didn't, support them, they defeat the monsters, then they get whatever is under the treasure. And hey, to the show's credit, Tsukasa and Sakuya are also critical of Keichiro in his actions here, in how basically the entire situation they are in could have been avoided if Keichiro wasn't a hot-blooded dumbass and fallen into even the most obvious of traps, which again would have been avoided had Keichiro allowed them to analyze the drill trigger machine like his superiors wanted to, until he just took it from the base. And yeah, this show, any way you slice it, does not make Keichiro look good, the more you think on the actions and what results from them when they had better options. But at least to its credit, they're acknowledging these faults within the narrative of the show and how Keichiro is a self-destructive dumbass. What works against the show is that they are not holding him accountable for them. And this is what keeps screwing up so many Sentai Reds. I keep hating to beat this point into the ground, but it is where Toei has consistently screwed up for years on this. Have they not gotten the memo? Ugh. But yeah, it's really good on both sides of this until Keichiro comes back, because basically his big plan is he's barely standing because of the poison. He was hospitalized heavily because of this poison. They're not sure that the poison will leave his system before it kills him. He just needs to hang on, and they're giving him a broad spectrum of poison antidotes to think it'll help, but instead, Keichiro's idea that will make him think that it will allow them to last through this and beat the guy, is fuse into Patranger Ryuga, aka use the good striker to fuse all three of the Patranger together for their finishing move. And this is a very stupid plan, because if it doesn't work, then Tsukasa and Sakuya will also be poisoned. And what's debilitating them on top of Keichiro's poisoning is that Tsukasa and Sakuya, are very heavily injured. Thus, a fusion of all of them with all of these ailments will only compound the error and make them even less capable of doing the job than it would have beforehand. So it's like, how are you supposed to beat this guy when all of you are injured, and there's no longer three of you, but now one of you who has all of these injuries together? It's like, you're not combining the strengths, you're compounding your injuries to make your condition even worse. Hell, because Kairi's down, it's actually up to Umika to actually paralyze the monster enough using the scissors dial machine's boomerang, because of their battle utility version of its use, to actually paralyze the monster long enough for this plan to even work. Had they not intervened, this plan would have failed spectacularly, as the guy would have just dodged. That is how bad your plan is in even concept, in that you have to get the guys you're constantly prosecuting, despite them not actually breaking the law, to actually get it to work. It's like, I know, it's consistently the Keichiro parts that are making me slap my head and be angry at this show, but otherwise, every other bit of it outside of him was actually really good and dramatic. Hell, Sakuya, even with his injuries, goes to the little bratty kid that Keichiro was trying to connect with last episode in getting his trip along, and he actually succeeds in doing it correctly, in that he ignores, how the little kid is a smarmy little brat, because Sakuya is amazingly oblivious to everything around him. But hey, in this case, it's clear it's because inexperience, it is because of his inexperience, and him, like, trying to make a point about what he meant and not getting off track with it, like Keichiro did. Like, not letting, how should I phrase this? He's not letting the little kid being a brat take away from him, like, the intention of his words. Like, it made it show that it wasn't just transparent, transparent mandates. I'm conforming to expectation to say this as a officer of the law or as an adult should to a little child. No, it came off of him actually believing that he should, not exactly help this kid, but make it so that he could go on this trip that Keichiro was so adamant about. It's like, it felt dishonest the way Keichiro did it last time, because he didn't really think about the consequences of this. It was all, A goes to C without, be in the middle with his thought process. Oh, this kid can't go on this trip because of gangler activity. We'll defeat the gangler immediately. Not, this kid can't go on this trip because of gangler activity. We'll make sure it's safe for them to actually go on this trip by doing our jobs thoroughly and correctly. Whereas that seemed to be more of what Sakuya came off as. It wasn't the event, but the person that seemed to more matter. Again, kind of a microcosm of why I'm really not liking Keichiro when I think more on this exact point. But, yeah, Sakuya, it's unfortunate that he didn't get the red posting for this season, because even though he's inexperienced, I think the naivete would have worked better in the red slot. It's like, again, frustration on that. But yeah, Lupinranger continued to show themselves as the more complex developed individuals in all of this. Patakaiser's strong with the crane and drill modules. it works. I liked how their finishing move worked, where they latched the monster of the week in its grasp and then swung them around until finally hitting them with the piercing drill attack, as it's using physics against it. You have all this centrifugal and then accelerated force of the monster's own mass working against the point of the drill to basically impale the monster on the spinning tip to destroy it. That completely works for me, and it's kind of not the best CGI. Toei has done better CGI, but the visual implication for that, I felt it pretty much worked, especially with how beefy Pat Kaiserstrong is as a suit. It's like almost half, again, the size of the Monster of the Week, and I'm like, whoever is in that suit this year has to be having a difficult time of it, as that feels upscaled in comparison to how Super Sentai mecha suits are usually scaled. Like, that's usually the size scale you get for a post super combination, you know, where two Megazords combine into one for a more powerful configuration. That seems more like the size scale it's on right now. So yeah, that's all the thoughts I got for Lupinranger versus Patranger this week. Build. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Because, yeah, end of the world doesn't happen. Evolt pulls from the Pandora's box the Evolt trigger, the true concentrated power of the Pandora's box, which, of course, renders inert all 60 full bottles, but it doesn't trigger for some reason. Apparently, Evolt doesn't have a high enough hazard level to actually get it to trigger, despite him being at hazard level 5, which was said to be incalculable and undoable from a normal human's ability to raise their own ability scores that high. Yeah. New information this week. Project Build was all so Evolt could build up himself a body that could surpass hazard level 5. And Sento fell for the trap. Whoops. Well, actually what happens is Bernage seems to have gotten herself enough strength back to interrupt the proceedings of the end of the world, and basically steals the Pandora's box, even though all the full bottles are empty, and Sento away to safety. It's here where she reveals that when she initially possessed Misora, that the reason why the Pandora's box failed to be opened correctly and released all the nebula gas is Evolt was planning to do this, well, back 10 years ago. However, Bernage stole the essences of all of the original 60 full bottles back then and absorbed it into the bangle, thus explaining why Misora fell comatose for about 7 years. It was all trapped within her body and in the bangle, so basically she just restores all the full bottles with the essences she took before that Evolt had already gathered back then. Basically, the entire proceedings of the whole nebula gas thing, the nebula gas incidents, and Faust, and Evolt doing all that was to refill all the bottles and purify them into the state to, and then gather them back again to just undo the tampering Bernage did, which amazingly has taken all this time. I'm guessing because of the divide or the skywalls in and of themselves creating a barrier to doing it again, that he had to trick the Katsuragis into reversing. But regardless, they have a full complement of full bottles back. This makes me have questions for the following episode where Banjo has to use an Evolve bottle to get his own powers back, but that's going to be more explained next week on why he has to do that. Regardless, all full bottles are back, and Sento's recovered a file that should allow him to convert one of the Pandora panels into his new power-up, which is the box we saw in the previews, and basically use that against Evolt to stop his actual grand scheme. Of course, everybody around him realizes that this is pretty much a suicide attempt, and, well, not exactly suicide attempt, but it's going to take Evolt down with him, and pretty much it does. Because converting a Pandora panel like that and using so many full battles in conjunction ramps up his hazard level beyond level 5 to level 6, and even beyond that. Last count Evolt specifically said was hazard level 6.3 or 6.4, and still rising. So, yeah. And it going up that rapidly basically causes the entire system to explode, but because Sento used that at the point where Evolt was no longer possessing Banjo, intending to take Sento as his new and ultimate host, well, Banjo's freed, and when Sento does this, so big explosion, and Sento collapses, now turned into an albino with white hair and red eyes. Ironically, albinism of that type, of the white fur and red eyes, actually is somewhat common in rabbits. In fact, you know what's, what the most infamous case of this was? The Killer of Cabanog! Monty Python. It's like the first thing that popped into my mind when I saw that with Sento. He is, with his closest affinity for all the full bottles being the Rabbit full bottle, to the point that Evolt even pulls an Evolve bottle out of him, because apparently he could just generate the damn things. Actually, that's a funny tangent as well. When he does that with Sento to pull out the most synchronous one, and he's like, that'll still work. This is specifically how he goes. It's like, I find that Build's comedy sometimes is an interruption to the narrative, but goddamn does it not have some very funny asides in these otherwise dramatic incidents. It makes the show feel very human, even though, you know, it's like the show kind of, I don't want to say repeats itself, but it spends a lot of time on these plots that it doesn't allow a lot else to develop. It's like, it's very simplistic but nuanced, versus, as I keep kind of going back to in my comparisons, Double, who had all of these smaller arc cases that built a better, more complex story. It's like, you don't feel like the world of Build is very fleshed out, as our scope of it is so small. X8, again, had kind of the same problem. We don't have a large picture of the world, because a lot of the person you need to help of the week became so non-essential to the plot. But that's not a knock against the show, it's just a formatting difference at the end of the day. Another thing I liked about this specific episode was what Kazumi was doing in it. In that, with everything going on, Kazumi felt like the guy who no longer had a story to him. I said as much last week, and I was happy to be proven wrong on that. In that, Kazumi still has to have it out with Gentoku over how the guy killed Akaba, the last of his friends and the last of the crows. And basically, the two are now at dead even hazard levels, so due to Kazumi's greater experience and battle tenacity, actually proves himself to be stronger than Rogue in this encounter, and basically makes him not quite promise, but gets him on board to helping them to stop Evolt, presumably. He doesn't actually show up in the next battle, but I'm guessing that's going to be part of next week and the further battles following with Mad Rogue and wherever they take Evolt next. But yeah, this is the first actual defeat Evolt has had in all of this. And considering it was defeat by proxy of winning, oh, it's definitely a setback, as I'm betting Sento has something else planned in this that's banking on someone else. He's someone that saw through Evolt's planning to basically use his win condition to try and kill him, so Yeah, I totally believe that he has something for Banjo to do that'll help turn the tides next week. That involves that Evolve bottle or whatever other kind of scheming Sento has to free himself as well. Because he had to anticipate the chances that his little plot wouldn't work and he'd just end up Evolt's next host. So this might actually end up being a two-step plan. I wouldn't put it past him from everything we've seen thus far. I mean, let's face it, he pulled the same thing with Rabbit Rabbit Tank Tank in anticipating what Namba would do. I'm thinking that with how Evolt has proven himself to be such a deep schemer, that another plan would be needed to anticipate this current plan and the chances of him getting possessed as Evolt Stage 3. Really, I gotta hope that what's next is he doesn't have the ability to trigger the hazard trigger, not the hazard trigger, the Evolve trigger from all of this, because, yeah, that would be bad. That would be very bad for that to be the direction they take this next. But then again, Apocalypse has been cancelled for the moment, so who knows. But I gotta say, I'm not on board with Evolt being the best villain of Kamen Rider, because, you can only do the scheming angle so much for just a world destruction story, but you have to admit, he's probably the one who's been an active antagonist who's won for the longest stretch. Like, everything has been according to his plan. Even when everything doesn't go to plan, he's still pretty much winning or advancing his own ultimate goal. We haven't had that many antagonists who can claim to say the same for as long a stretch. I mean, basically since Rabbit's introduction at episode 28, Evolt's been on a straight winning streak. So, 8 episodes of the show where the heroes aren't actually doing that well or are playing into the hands of the villains. Yeah, it's like, for every step they take, they get pushed back too, and I'm not going to say he's the best villain in Kamen Rider, as we still have to see how, like, the lasting impact of his plans, but he's definitely up there, I feel. So yeah, obviously this is leading into Genius Form's debut at around episode 38, but some recent news about trailer preview information have come out, and it looks like Build is going to be the first Rider series to actually hit 50 episodes in quite some time. They might do it for 49 or 48, but definitely more than Exide got last year. So, a later introduction for Genius Form in that context isn't that bad. We've had some long-runner shows that were on 50-51 episodes that had a Final Form introduction that late, and that works. It just needs to stay around for a solid 10 episodes to not seem like an unnecessary waste. So hopefully they'll be getting to that sooner rather than later. We do know that Cross Sea Dragon's getting another variant form that's basically a kit bash to go along with the Evolve Bottle next week, and not exactly that thrilled on it. I even joked on Twitter, alas, Cross Sea Dragon Magma, we hardly knew ye, because of how Build has gone about using Cross Sea Dragon's forms up until now, but hopefully we'll see it back sooner rather than later. I mean, just an Evolt version of Cross Sea Dragon, that's not what we were expecting to see as a true final form for the guy. Especially since Kazumi is supposed to be getting a final form for Greece, according to other preview information. We haven't actually seen any information on the suit yet. But yeah, that's all I got for this week. Better Lupinranger versus Patranger than we've been having, and considering the arc with Build quite well. Yeah, that's all I can think of to talk about on this, so I'll see you all next week.